Whoops, I didn't want that one. I wanted this one. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. This is the bullet for October 14th, 2022. As you've already seen once, joining me today, Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Normally today we just do training, but we've got a few stories we want to cover because we've had a few breaking stories hit today. And we're going to talk a little bit of news, and then we're going to get into sights and sighting your firearm. Tom, I want to start off with news from our home office in Bellevue. The Second Amendment Foundation today filed suit in a federal court challenging new concealed carry statute in New York State that, among other things, prohibits concealed carry in churches. Joining SAF in this legal action are Firearms Policy Coalition and two private citizens. The lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court for the Western District of New York. The defendants are the State Police Superintendent Kevin P. Bruin, yes, that Bruin, Niagara County District Attorney Brian Seaman, and Erie County District Attorney John Flynn, all in their official capacities. The case is known as Hardaway versus Bruin. The 23-page federal complaint says Hardaway and Boyd are leaders of their respective churches who wish to exercise their fundamental individual right to bear arms in public for self-defense and for the safety of their congregants, but are prohibited from doing so because the state law prevents them from doing so. This is a quote from Alan Gottlieb. Here is yet another example of the sweeping irrationality of New York's hastily slapped together law, which was obviously written to allow the state to dance around U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. One would think by now the state would have wised up and changed the law to comply with not only the letter of the High Court ruling, but the spirit in which the decision was written. Instead, New York officials are determined to fight progress, not to mention the Supreme Court's common sense, by engaging in legal acrobatics that promise to mire the state in federal lawsuits for the foreseeable future. The right of self-defense is the oldest human right, and New York's law is written to frustrate the exercise of that right at every turn. Tom, I think my boss says it perfectly.
It just boggles the mind. Interesting that the two plaintiffs are men of the cloth.
Yes.
They're accepting that there's a risk. Something that used to just grind my dad's gears when he was an elder in our church was they'd have budget issues. And one fellow, who was also my girlfriend's father, so I couldn't get too excited about it, was, God will provide. And my dad's response was, God provided you, and God provided me, and we all have hands and a brain. Let's get some stuff done. Tactically speaking, think about it. If you go to church in your Sunday finest and your best jewelry and you're sitting in a room with your back to the main door, I mean, right there, that just sends up flags.
Yes.
How many shootings have we heard of on the news of churches?
Well, and
how many
think about it.
We trained.
If you make if you make churches soft targets, just like hospitals, just like movie theaters, if you make and advertise them as gun-free zones, where do you think bad guys are going to go? Where there are easy to hit targets.
There's going to be a bunch of people, as I said, with their back to the main door, and when they're going to be there. The church shootings, if you look at the stats, often start, instead of in the building, they start in the parking lot and work their way in. This is why a lot of church teams, security teams, are being organized. We see them at FAS. I know a lot of the other schools. I know Gunsight's had a class for that, and other people and trainers have had teams come for security training as well. It's a serious issue, and I think you need to be practical about it. But Absolutely. New York State, being New York State, and they're special.
Oh, they're special, all right.
Supreme Court ruling, and they're wasting their taxpayers' money.
I think most of the elected officials in New York are special. They need to be on the special short bus. But
the short bus, yes, special. Mom told them.
Let me get a couple more stories in here because I want to save as much time as we can because we got a really cool topic to talk about in training, but a federal judge in West Virginia has ruled that a federal ban on possessing a gun with its serial number removed is unconstitutional. The first such ruling since U.S. Supreme Court dramatically expanded, no, it restored, it didn't expand, restored gun rights in June. U.S. District Judge Joseph Goodwin in Charleston on Wednesday found that the new law was not consistent with the U.S. historical tradition of firearm regulation. The new standard laid out by the Supreme Court in its landmark ruling, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. The decision came in a criminal case charging a man with illegally possessing a gun with its serial number removed that was found in his car. And I'm going to leave it there. There's backstory to this, as I mentioned yesterday on the air. There's another charge that is not being dismissed. The guy, unfortunately, is a felon in possession. That charge stays, but unserialized goes away. Now, there are a ton of unserialized firearms that are not even homemade firearms, at least made by the person in possession of them now. You want to talk about that a little bit? And when you're ready, I've got a picture I got to show.
Well, good. Put that picture up. We talked about that before we went on air. This is something from my personal collection, which clearly needs to be dusted. I remember this when I was a small child. This belonged to my grandfather, and all the grandkids called it the pirate gun. I have no idea of its origin. It's missing some pieces, but I looked it over again before I took that photo for you. There's not serial number anywhere on that. Judging from its design and condition, I am guessing early 1800s at a really, really rough guess. And if anybody knows for sure, please comment. They talk about the tradition in the ruling on this case, and there's no tradition of serial numbers by manufacturers. It's obviously a manufactured firearm. The serial numbers was what, from 1968 we were talking about?
The 1968 Gun Control Act, yep.
Gun Control Act. So it's an inventory thing, but no, clearly they're fighting a losing battle on this. I think our side will win on that.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Let me check. I do want to remind everybody. I like this comment. Get this one up here fast. Gerald over on the Facebook side says, with catch and release, they're making every location unsafe to go without a firearm.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't live that far from Seattle or Portland, Oregon. Fortunately, where I live, it's not at all uncommon to see people carry, but
yeah,
we're the good guys here. So
there you go.
Yeah, the catch and release thing, and then they're wondering why there's a problem. That also grinds my gears.
All right, one more story I want to get to, then we're going to get into the main topic of the day. And this one is good news. And again, from the Home Office in Bellevue, Washington.
We could use some good news.
The Second Amendment Foundation scored a victory in a ruling by Tennessee Appeals Court panel striking down a gun ban by a public housing authority in the community of Columbia on the grounds that it violates the Second Amendment, citing a recent Supreme Court language in the case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. The Supreme Court case, it's a gift that just keeps on giving.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it's not so much.
Yes. SAF supported Columbia resident Kinsley Braden in this case. He was represented by attorneys David Seagale. And by the way, David Seagale, he's spoken many times at Gun Rights Policy Conference. He is a rock star in Second Amendment law. Also, Eugene Hallworth of Columbia. The case is known as Columbia Housing and Redevelopment Corporation versus Kinsley Braden. Writing for the three-judge panel, Judge Frank Clement Jr. explained, in the light of the Supreme Court's most recent decision in Bruin and keeping in mind the presumptively unconstitutional status of Columbia Housing's policy based on Supreme Court's decision in Heller, we conclude that a total ban on the ability of law-abiding residents like Mr. Braden to possess a handgun within their public housing unit for the purpose of self-defense is unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. I'm going to skip down and I'm going to read another quote from my boss, Alan Gottlieb. We're delighted with the appeals court ruling, said SAF founder and executive vice president Alan Gottlieb. This underscores the far-reaching effect of the U.S. Supreme Court's landmark Bruin opinion. Mr. Braden was evicted from public housing complex because he had a firearm. The court properly held that such a prohibition is a non-starter. Rulings like this make it clear the Second Amendment means what it says. This is another victory in our mission to win firearms freedom, one lawsuit at a time. Congratulations to Mr. Braden, and good job to the attorneys and David Seagale and Eugene Hallworth. And another example, Tom, of when you pass gun restrictions, you hurt those that are economically challenged the most. If you're poor enough, you have to live in public subsidized housing. You really need you cannot afford to hire a security team to take care of your defensive situation for you. You've got to handle it yourself.
That's where the crime happens, most of it, unfortunately. But that's just a reality of life. Your feelings about it have no bearing on the reality of it. So again, we have that favorite state on the East Coast that thinks it's special, and it gets to redefine what the Supreme Court has ruled in the Bruin case. Awesome Bruin case. So many things are going to have repercussions from that.
I want to get a couple more comments in here real quick, then we'll get to our main topic.
Always good to hear comments.
Donald over on the Facebook side says, my stepfather-in-law organized a security team at his church. There's a scoped sniper rifle in the balcony sound room.
I hope you have somebody behind that rifle.
And I hope that person's got some good training.
But yeah, you have to accept the realities of it. I mean, the history is there. The news stories are there. They're right in front of us. Again, like Dad said, God will provide. He provided you and me. He had St. Michael, if you're of that faith. St. Michael didn't go with hopes and prayers. He went with knives and swords.
Two more comments and we'll get into our regular topic. Marty Hayes, somebody we both know and respect.
Hey, Marty.
Says, I've worked with Seagale on a couple of cases for SAF. He is totally a rock star. No argument here. The guy has done amazing work for SAF in getting our rights back. And then Charlie Chambers says, the Bruin decision wasn't possible without the McDonald decision, Heller decision. Rights aren't according to zip codes.
That's a nice soundbite, Charlie. I like that.
It is. It is. All right, Tom, let's go ahead and we're going to move on to our You've Got a Gun, and we're going to use, I believe all your examples are handguns, but You've Got a Gun, you've got to have a way to make sure that the projectile that comes out the end of the barrel gets to where you intend to get to, and not a few feet right, a few feet left, high or low. That's done by sighting, and sighting is a lot. Let me go ahead and put up the picture we had of your cap and ball.
See the sights on it?
I don't see. I see a hammer. That's what I see, and it's too dark in the front to see if there's a bead on there or not.
There's not.
So that really was a point and click interface, a point and hope interface, I think, is probably the better. And we've come a long, long way since then.
It's interesting to read the history. I would love to spend some time with Carl Wren, who is a noted firearms historian. But just thinking where we came from, and that kind of drives why we have what we have. So I'm going to do the 16-minute, super fast, leaving a lot of stuff out version of why we have sights. So firearms are invented. Gunpowder, some kind of projectile, a rock, maybe a cast piece of iron or lead, a cannon, and a tube. Visual aid. This is a tube. How do you get the projectile to go where you want it? Well, ideally, you would look through the tube, and that would be roughly where the projectile would go, except you can't look through the tube. So what do? Well, how about if we point the tube at it? Before we had rifled firearms, straight rifling, just to keep the fouling out, was like the late 1400s. And right about the 1500s, spiral rifling came, so you had something accurate. Now, to get that accuracy, we needed sights instead of just looking down the tube. Well, if you have a tube, you can kind of look down and maybe get the flats or the things right. What they did with early cannon was they put a little thing on the front, and you had a front sight. If you could line the tube up, and I don't know if you can see this piece of PVC pipe, you've got a stripe there that's coaxial with the hole in the tube. Put a bumpy thing on the front. Yeah. Put a bumpy something on the back, line them up, and you've got a better idea where the tube goes. And that is the beginning of sights. Not all have them. This is the same gun we took a picture of. This is a non-firing piece. It's been rendered non-fireable, but you see there are no sights on it. So what one can do is one can look down, and hopefully the flats will provide a silhouette, and you can get a rough idea where this non-rifled pistol would go. As time went on and rifling got better, and the mechanical accuracy, the ability to shoot a tight group, got better, this is another replica gun. Okay, this is a replica that does have a serial number because it was a kit that was made after 1968. And if I can align this, you can see we have some vestigial sights. Okay, we have some rear sights here. It's a piece of metal, and with a file, it's easy to cut a notch. And I'm not going to point this at the camera because Marty would have a hissy, and so would my wife. Here's just a vestigial front sight, and you would line up looking down the barrel in a straight line through the notch at the front sight, and that would give you a better index of where the gun was pointed. That went along for a long time. You look at the old 1911s, semi-automatic pistols from 1911, and those sights are itty-bitty, teeny-weeny. So we have more itty-bitty, teeny-weeny sights. The rest of these things I have are firearms. They are rendered inoperable. Okay, this is a J-frame. Okay, fairly modern pistol. There's no rear sights. It's what's called a gutter snipe sight. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little bit of white paint back to pick it up. And this little itty-bitty front sight, and I think this is Diane's pistol's taking off the white. It's really hard to get a precise lining up. Okay, you have what's called the sight radius with this piece of PVC pipe again. The longer the distance from the back to the front, the more finely you can, here we'll do the old gun thing, the more finely you can align your front sight with your rear sight.
Yes.
As it gets farther away, geometry makes it a more precise thing.
That's why you very seldom see competition guns that are 2-inch revolvers.
We had a guy on staff at FAS at one time who was a master of the 2-inch revolver, and he was good out to 25 yards, but it took him a lot of practice. But these little vestigial sights. So, moving on, sights got a little bit bigger and became adjustable. So we get this Ruger GP100, and I got this because Marty hates Ruger GP100s. There you go, Marty. One thing we did as time went on, we have adjustable sights. So this sight can be adjusted for height, and it can be adjusted back and forth for windage with a screw adjustment. They're not quite as robust as fixed sights, but it happens. Also, right about the 1980s or so, and if somebody has a better number, please make a comment. And I don't know if this is going to show here. We started getting dots on sights.
Mm-hmm.
Show really well. The two dots, a dot here on each side of the rear sight, and then something on the front. Might show better with... No, I don't think it will. We'll go with that.
And some manufacturers even, and these are usually aftermarket, make those little dots out of tritium so they glow in the dark. This
particular set is, so they do glow in the dark, which is wonderful. And there's some pluses and some minuses. The biggest problem is, I wish those showed up better. How do you line the dots up? I've even got we'll use a picture here This is just off the internet of what a sight picture looks like.
Yep.
But you can see that there's a dot on one side and a dot on the other side and a dot on the front sight. Do you line up the tops of the dots, the bottom of the dots, the middle of the dots, if they're machined the same size? And the reason they're dots because it's easy to machine a round thing with a drill. That can make a difference in where your sights are regulated, where it's going to put the round. People were saying, well, let's make them different colors so you don't get the front sight confused with the rear sight in the dark. So instead of your rear sights and your front sight being lined up like they're supposed to, what if you had this? And you'd shoot way off. Well, if you're shooting that badly, get thee to gun school.
Yes,
yes. That's a whole stance and draw issue. Night sights are wonderful, but they can be a little slow.
This one just goes out just to Marty Hayes. Marty, you are welcome on these anytime. Shoot me a message, and whenever Tom is on, I'll bring you on too. We can add more people to this screen very, very easily. And I say that because I trust Marty implicitly. Marty is a genius when it comes to defense and handguns. But I want to get this comment in. Ruger GP 100 will lock up if you do not return the trigger fully after firing. Not good. You know, coming from a semi-auto guy whose entire time of shooting pistols in his adult life has been finding the trigger reset, that sounds really dangerous to me.
It's an interesting discussion he and I have had several times. Something else, though, just something good I'll say about Marty, we're getting back to that 3-dot thing. Yeah. Something I learned from him early on, and I do regularly with my students with their permission. I'll take a black Sharpie and mark those things out because you spend so much freaking time, it doesn't seem like much, parts of a second, but time is life in a gunfight. Lining those dots up, if you just have a good stance so you automatically draw and the sights are right in front of your eye already, you'll get rid of the freaking dots. One thing moving on, though, that I do find useful with glow in the dark dots, and again, I don't know if this is going to show up or not. You see that one dot in the rear, and then there's one dot on the front sight? This is a brand from Heine, H-E-I-N-I-E, called Straight Eights, and what one simply does is takes the front dot and the rear dot underneath it, like the number 8, and that aligns very, very quickly. So if you want to have night sights that glow and dots on your rear sight, that's a possibility for you. So sights are moving on. We've got the sight radius. We've got how fast you pick them up. Depending on how your sights are regulated, you line the, as we all know from gun school, right? We get the picture again.
Yep.
The top of the front sight lined up with the top of the rear sight. Okay, with some light between them. And you've got some leeway. If you want to do really, really fine precision work, you want as little light on either side as you can. The sight widths, there's all kinds of mechanical tricks and machining tricks you can do with that.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, next comes the problem, and this is the last one I've got to show. What if you're like me and you're over 50, or like me and over 60? Okay?
Getting there.
These are progressive lenses. Anybody, and even little kids, can only focus one distance at a time. You can focus your eyes sharply on the rear sight, the front sight, or the target. And there's enough flexibility in the eye when we're younger to be able to do that. As we age, we lose that ability. And as a certain mentor of mine likes to say, you align the fuzzy front sight with the fuzzy rear sight on the fuzzy target. There are all kinds of cool things you can do with the lineless bifocals. I have to shoot now with my nose up so I can see the sights clearly and then drop my nose down slightly back and forth.
It's not because you're stuck up and you got your nose.
Yeah, I've seen video of myself and I look like I'm real smooth. But these are my everyday glasses because I'm a defensive handgun shooter and I don't wear special glasses.
Sure.
Then comes the latest, the red dot. So you're looking at a red dot that's the same focal distance as the target, so you don't have to focus your eyes in and out, back and forth over distance. And again, this is an inoperable firearm, so I can do what I'm going to do. This is a Crimson Trace laser grip that's actuated by a switch here. And I can do this safely because it's not a gun. Okay, so I'm looking at a red dot. Here, we'll do it on my cell phone. I don't like my cell phone. Projected on a target, and you can also. I don't want to drop the hammer on a slideless gun. See that if you're moving the trigger, it's moving the gun. You can also use it for a diagnostic. I love laser sights.
Me too.
Unfortunately, my cats like laser sights, and they're not cat toys, so we don't do that.
So you
But
just
last-
turn them into assault cats, man. You don't even need to pull the trigger. Put the laser on the bad guy. The cats will take care of it.
Yeah, that's been proposed. And then the last iteration is the pistol-mounted optic, the red dot sight. All kinds of cool things happening with that. When they first came out, they used to be big tubes. They were so heavy they would change the mass of the slide and affect the function of the gun. Now they're fairly lightweight. Slides are coming with the machined plate for them. Some brands are actually solar powered, various means, solar light or a light gathering fiber optic up here. We didn't get time to mention fiber optic sights. They're getting lower on the profile, so you don't need, there's a new one out now, you don't need the special front and rear that are bigger. And you have, oh, this is going to show again, somewhere in there,
Yeah,
you
there
have
we go.
it. Okay, so just as it is backwards, finding the red dot, it takes some practice and some training with red dot sights to be able to find the dot quickly. The biggest complaint we have with students is they get the gun up. This is a dummy gun, and they can't find the sight they can't find the red dot, and that's a function of learning to train so you always have it. Some schools are actually having red dot classes to show that and the various advantages of it. For guys my age with the eye issues, I can see this happening more and more. I think probably in the next 5 years I'm going to be converting some more over. I'm fighting it. You know, I know what I know and I'm used to what I'm used to. But we'll see.
I absolutely get that. Let me get a few comments here because we've got some great comments coming in here.
And I got it done in less than 15 minutes.
PNW Woods, people from Seattle with guns are awesome, just saying. And he also admits I may be biased.
PNW, I wonder what that stands for.
Couldn't be Pacific Northwest, could it?
Could possibly be. Thank you, brother or sister.
And then Larry on the Facebook side, anytime you have colors and or angles, you have aberrations that affect clear alignment for precision. You want to talk about that a little bit, Tom?
There's one issue that's kind of semi-related, Larry. I'm gonna riff off of you. The red dot that I just showed, the pistol-mounted optic, that are the rage. Eric Gelhaus, one of the gun sight instructors, is right as we speak working on collating some data from the recent gun sight alumni shoot, the gas match, where he was looking at the advantages and differences in score with iron sight shooters as opposed to red dot shooters. My wife has astigmatism. She looks through this sight and she doesn't see a dot. She sees a streak. That can be a problem. Some people are more sensitive to some colors than others. Red was the traditional color, especially with lasers, because the technology was cheaper and more reliable with red. Green took a while to come out with lasers because of some of the engineering problems. Crimson Trace came out with it. I talked to one of the engineers.
And power usage as well.
Yeah, battery consumption was a huge thing. Once they solved that problem, you know, it's going. Green tends to show up better for the eye, but you can get fiber optic stuff in, you know, rainbow colors. But the thing is, it's got to be what works for you, not what you read in a magazine. So borrow a lot of friends' guns and try them out.
Let me get this one in because this is a question custom made for Tom Walls. Optics can act as a lever to take a pistol out of battery. How is this potential issue addressed in determining them for concealed carry use?
Okay, so I'm assuming what you mean by the question, and here again is just the slide. I've got this in my holster, and something levers on the optic to pull the pistol out of battery. I have not seen any reports of that. If you have some, I would like to review those. I think it's a non-issue. You know, you could say snag the sights, but it's certainly something to be aware of. I wish I had a better, more complete answer for you, but I'd be BSing at you if I did.
Um, I
think it's hypothetical is where I am right now, I guess.
Most of my training has been done on full-size Glocks with stock Glock sights, which, if you've ever shot a stock Glock, they leave a lot to be desired.
I'm proud of you. Yes. Well, they're referred to in the industry as sight placeholders. Until you get real sights put on your gun, or dovetail protectors.
Right now my carry gun has a laser on it. My carry gun is a Car CW9 with a Crimson Trace laser on it. Susan's carry gun is a Glock 43X with a red dot. We both went away from relying solely on iron sights. My eyes are not of the. I honestly believe my eyes adapt to laser much better than they do to a. I've used Susan's. I've shot other people's red dots. Mm-hmm. I believe I'm just faster with a laser than I am with a red dot. I'm sure Marty Hayes could prove me wrong, but
lasers have advantages over red dot sights. A good laser, the first green one I was introduced to was in Nevada, in the bright Nevada sunlight, and we were out 25 yards, and it just popped, the green ones. Big advantage. With a laser, though, one of the advantages that people seem to have forgotten is that you don't need to get, dummy gun here, you don't have to need to get the sights up to your eyeballs. You can be in a disadvantaged position and look at the target and put the dot there without having to lift the gun up. It opens up all kinds of possibilities. Lasers aren't as popular as they used to be, and I think that's a darn shame.
Also, one advantage that I found is shooting from unusual positions.
Absolutely.
If you put the dot, I mean, it's all range dependent. If your gun is sighted, or your laser is sighted for 25 yards, and you're 25 yards away, you put the dot on what you want to hit, you pull the trigger. It doesn't have to be an absolute perfect picture alignment with the sights. If you're off to the side, if you're shooting from behind cover and you can peek around a little bit, just put the dot on it and you got it.
I have a target signed by Jim Cirillo in my office downstairs. And it's a bet that I won with Diane. And part of that bet involved me using a laser in an extremely disadvantaged position. And part of it was the fact that I cheated because I'm a guy and I was more stable in that position. But she bought dinner anyway.
All right. Great. Now we're over time, but I've got to get this comment in. The real question is, how much speed is really required for self-defense?
Bingo.
That depends on each situation. I don't mean to. I'm saying that as Paul Lathrop. There are times, I guess, you've got plenty of time to draw, take aim, make sure your sight picture is perfect, and get that shot off. And then there's times when Marty Hayes is in the shoot house and he's coming at you with a knife. He killed me twice, by the way. That you don't have that kind of time.
I have to agree with Marty 100% on that. We're used to competition and time standards for qualifications, and you have to show the skill somehow, and group size after a while doesn't do it. So if you can do the same group but faster than the other guy, it implies some skill. In self-defense shooting, sometimes biding your time is actually the way to do it. Topic for a whole nother podcast or 12.
Yes. Speaking of which, we are almost 5 minutes over on our time, and
I blame you.
Yeah, we had to get some news in too. I mean, these stories came in, and I wanted to cover them. But Tom, thank you as always. Great talking with you, and great topics when we do talk.
I always enjoy coming on, Paul, and I really appreciate your support of our organization and all the other gun schools in general. and the tremendous amount of work that you do that most people are not aware of, the number of hours you put in weekly, regularly, and quietly to help support our Second Amendment rights. Thanks, Paul.
You bet. Now, on our way out the door, is there anything Firearms Academy of Seattle's that got coming up that you want to plug real quick?
We have not that much left, come to think of it. I'm trying to go through the schedule because I'm not teaching after another week or so, and the only thing I have is our handgun retention course. We're starting to wind down. In the Pacific Northwest, that's a weather thing and a daylight thing, as we're an outdoor range. However, anyone, anywhere who has purchased a new gun, a new AR, a new pistol, because we're seeing so many more. We saw a huge increase in concealed handgun licenses in the state of Washington alone, just in the month of August. Please, please, please seek out professional training. There are instructors, good instructors, all over the United States. Please, please, please encourage your friends that are first-time shooters to get professional instruction. Can't tell you how much that will help them, save them time, and save them some grief down the road.
Amen. Amen. What I keep saying last comment, and then Marty comes back and makes me lie. In my experience, difference between iron sights and red dots is about a quarter of a second, everything else being equal. There are times I imagine that quarter of a second is going to make a big difference. There are times when you've got a second or two. I'm guessing.
Again, wonderful topic for another time. Would love to have Marty weigh in on that.
Yes, absolutely. Marty, I don't remember if I still have your cell phone number or not. I'm going to be giving you a shout. I need to get you on with Tom sometime here very soon. Folks, that is going to do it for us today. I want to thank everybody for commenting, for tuning in. And tomorrow is the weekend edition of the Bullet, noon Central Time. We'll be covering the week in news in review. Do come please join us for that. That's going to do it for the regular weekly edition of the Bullet. And everybody, until next time, thanks for watching.